The moon hung low over the forest, a pale silver eye watching everything below. Mist rolled between the trunks of ancient trees, curling around moss-covered roots like ghostly fingers. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, and somewhere in the distance a river murmured its endless song. It was a night that belonged to shadows, to secrets, and to creatures who moved silently between the trees. She moved like a shadow herself. Ilara, the vampire, stepped lightly over fallen branches, her long dark cloak brushing the leaves. Her eyes, sharp and golden, reflected the moonlight as she scanned the forest floor. She was alone as usual. The world of humans, with its clamor and warmth, had grown distant to her. She had learned long ago that closeness brought pain, and pain was a luxury she could not afford. Then a soft, desperate whine reached her ears. It was faint, almost swallowed by the wind, but she caught it, her head tilted, senses straining. The sound came again, more urgent this time, a small, frightened cry. Alara's steps slowed, silent and cautious. She followed the sound through the thick mist, her boots making no noise against the damp forest floor. Soon, she found the source. A small white wolf pup struggled in a cruel trap. Its fur was stained with mud and blood, its young eyes wide with fear. The iron teeth of the trap bit into its leg and the little creature whimpered, twisting in pain. The sight stirred something long buried within Ilara, a flicker of care, of compassion. She knelt beside it, careful not to startle it further. "This was set by hunters," she whispered, her voice soft and musical, carrying easily through the quiet of the forest. "But you are safe now." The pup's ears twitched and it let out a low growl, still afraid but sensing she meant no harm. Ilara reached forward, her long fingers deftly unlocking the iron trap. She had always been skilled with her hands, with tools, with the kind of careful precision that life demanded. Slowly, the trap gave way, releasing the pup. It stumbled forward, limping but alive, and collapsed against her chest. Ilara lifted it gently, cradling the small body as if it were as fragile as porcelain. She felt the warmth of life pulse through it, so different from her own coldness. A strange ache gripped her chest, a longing she hadn't felt in centuries. To protect something so innocent felt dangerous yet irresistible. She had saved the wolf pup, but somehow it had already begun to save her too. Suddenly the forest shifted. Shadows deepened. Leaves rustled, though no wind stirred them. Ilara's senses sharpened, every hair on her skin alert. Danger, she thought. Always danger. She scanned the trees and her golden eyes caught movement, a fleeting massive shape disappearing behind a hill. She frowned, suspicion rising. The forest was full of eyes unseen and waiting. But for now nothing approached. Perhaps it was just her imagination, or a wild creature curious about her presence. Ilara turned her gaze back to the pup. It was trembling in her arms, tiny but fierce in its fear. She whispered softly, "You'll be safe with me. I promise." The pup licked her hand, hesitant, its trust slow but growing. She smiled faintly, a shadow of a smile that did not reach her eyes. Care was dangerous, but she could not deny it. Not tonight. She moved carefully through the forest, following a path she knew well. Ancient trees arched overhead, their branches forming a cathedral of shadows. The moonlight filtered through, casting silver patterns on the forest floor. Her footsteps were soundless, yet every creature seemed to watch, aware of her presence. Owls hooted softly, and the distant howl of a wolf echoed, mournful and lonely. The pup stiffened at the sound, ears flat against its head. Ilara murmured reassurances, but a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Could she really protect it from the world beyond these woods? Could she protect herself even? Hours passed as she navigated the forest. Occasionally she paused to set the pup down, letting it shake its legs, sniff the air, and regain strength. Slowly the pup began to trust her, following her lead, its small tail flicking with cautious curiosity. She felt a subtle warmth grow in her chest every time it looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. Perhaps this night was meant for something more than solitude. Perhaps the universe had a strange, twisted sense of humor, placing innocence in the path of one who had sworn herself to shadows. By the time the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, the vampire reached the edge of the forest. Beyond, rolling hills stretched toward distant mountains, and the silhouette of her castle rose against the fading stars. A fortress of stone and iron, centuries old, cloaked in mystery and legend. It was a place of safety, of solitude, and now of unexpected responsibility. Ilara paused at the forest's edge, lifting the pup to her chest once more. "We are almost home," she whispered. The pup nuzzled her neck, its small warmth against her skin both comforting and alarming. She had lived for centuries untouched by affection, yet here in her arms was a spark she could not deny. But as they stepped forward, the ground trembled beneath them. At first it was subtle, a faint vibration, easily mistaken for the forest's restless creatures. Then it grew stronger, a low, resonant thrum that shook the leaves from the trees. Elara's eyes narrowed, golden and sharp, scanning the horizon. There, far in the distance, moving closer, was a figure so large it seemed impossible. A giant, its steps slow but deliberate, making the earth itself tremble with each stride. The pup stiffened, letting out a low growl, ears flattened against its head. Elara's heart, usually so still, skipped a beat. She had faced hunters, beasts, even other vampires in her long life, but this was something different. Something ancient, powerful, and filled with intent. The giant's silhouette grew larger against the morning light, massive arms swinging, eyes glowing faintly with an intelligence that was unsettling. Elara's instincts screamed caution. She shifted, positioning herself between the pup and the approaching giant, her cloak flaring as she moved. For the first time in centuries, she felt something she had not expected. Fear. Not for herself, but for the tiny, white creature in her arms. It was her responsibility now, and she would not fail. The giant stopped a short distance from the forest edge. Even from here, its presence was overwhelming, and the air seemed to vibrate with its power. Elara held her breath, waiting, watching, every sense alert. The pup whimpered softly, and she tightened her hold, whispering a promise she did not yet understand herself. "No one will take you from me." The giant's gaze met hers, and for a fleeting moment she felt an unspoken question pass between them. Why had it come? Was it friend or foe? The forest held its breath, the mist curling like frozen smoke as two ancient beings regarded one another. One cloaked in shadow, the other a mountain of flesh and mystery. The world beyond the forest seemed to fade, leaving only the tremor of destiny between them. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the giant moved forward, striding toward her castle. Elara's eyes followed it, golden and unwavering. She knew deep in her heart that the events of this night would change everything. The pup was safe for now, but the arrival of the giant meant that her world of solitude was over. Something new, something powerful had entered her life, and it would not leave quietly. Her chest tightened as she turned back toward her path. The castle awaited, looming on the hill, silent and ancient. Yet she could not shake the feeling that the forest shadows whispered a warning she could not yet understand. The pup nestled closer to her, unaware of the storm approaching, its small body a fragile anchor in a world of danger. And as the first light of dawn spilled across the horizon, Elara took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. For the vampire who had lived for centuries in shadows, the next day promised not peace but a storm of fate, power, and a bond that neither creature could yet comprehend. The morning sun broke over the horizon, spilling gold across the jagged hills. Mist still clung to the forest's edges, and the air smelled of wet earth and pine. Atop the highest cliff, the vampire's castle rose like a sentinel, dark stones gleaming faintly in the first light. Its towers pierced the sky, sharp as obsidian, and its windows reflected the distant sun like watchful eyes. Inside, the castle was quiet. Elara moved through the cold stone halls with grace, her cloak trailing behind her. The white wolf pup padded softly at her heels, cautious but curious, sniffing every corner as if claiming the place for itself. Elara's eyes, golden and sharp, scanned the corridors. Every shadow seemed alive. Every whisper of wind through the towers carried secrets. The memory of the previous night lingered in her mind. The forest, the trap, the trembling pup, and the giant's enormous silhouette at the horizon. She could not forget it. The sight of that creature had struck a chord deep within her, one she did not yet understand. It was not fear alone. There was something more, a recognition, a pull she could neither deny nor explain. The castle's great hall was empty when she entered. Long tables of polished oak reflected the faint light of torches, and banners bearing her family's crest hung heavy on the walls. She set the pup down, letting it sniff the room, and listened. No footsteps answered hers, no voices disturbed the quiet. She expected this solitude, it was hers by right, by centuries of habit, but it felt heavier today. As if the castle itself awaited an arrival it knew would change everything. Her thoughts were interrupted by a distant rumble. At first it was subtle, like the earth itself groaning, but then it grew stronger, shaking the banners and rattling the torches. Ilara's heart beat faster. The giant. It had come. She moved to the balcony, the pup following, and peered over the edge. Below, at the base of the cliff, the giant stood tall, his immense form casting long shadows across the courtyard. He was magnificent and terrifying, muscles rippling beneath rough-spun garments and eyes that glimmered with intelligence. Every movement was deliberate, each step measured, yet there was a gentleness in the way he paused to observe the castle. Ilara did not lower her gaze. She had seen many dangers, faced countless threats, yet this presence unsettled her. There was power in him, ancient and raw, and something about it spoke to a part of her that had long been silent. She felt an uncharacteristic flutter in her chest, a mixture of curiosity, caution, and perhaps something more. The giant's voice echoed across the courtyard, deep and rolling, though not harsh. "I seek the one who walks between shadows," he said. "The one who saved what should not have survived." Ilara's hand tightened around the balcony railing. She understood immediately that he referred to the white wolf pup. Somehow he knew. Somehow he had watched, and the knowledge stirred unease and fascination in her. "I am she," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "I protect what needs saving. This pup is safe here." The giant nodded slowly, as though studying her, weighing her words. "I mean no harm to those under your protection. But the world beyond these walls is dangerous, and there are forces that watch and wait. Even a small creature like that pup carries weight in the balance of fate." Ilara's eyes narrowed. "And why should I trust you? You are a stranger to this place, and your power—" She hesitated, realizing that words were unnecessary. The sheer size of him, the calm in his movement, the confidence in his presence, everything about him spoke louder than any speech. The giant stepped closer to the castle gates, his shadow stretching across the courtyard like a living storm. The pup whimpered, uncertain, and Ilara instinctively lowered her hands to comfort it. "Do not approach," she warned softly. "Not yet." He paused, lifting his enormous hands in a gesture of peace. "I am not your enemy," he said, "but I am bound to the fate that touches this castle, and the small creature you guard." Ilara's heart beat faster. She had lived centuries in control, untouched by others' intentions. Yet here was a being whose presence challenged everything she believed about power, solitude, and trust. She did not know if she could read him, could not yet know whether he was friend or danger. And that uncertainty, it was a dangerous pull. Inside the castle, whispers began to stir. Servants peeked from behind doors, eyes wide with fear and fascination. The castle itself seemed to breathe differently, as if aware of the giant's presence. Ilara moved through the corridors to meet him, the pup at her side, its fur bristling with alertness. When she reached the courtyard, the giant bowed his head slightly, careful not to touch her or the pup. "I am called Theron," he said, his voice a low resonance that seemed to echo in the stones themselves. "I did not come to fight. I came to warn. There are forces at work that would take this pup, and through it, you." Ilara's golden eyes searched his face. There was truth there, she could sense it. Yet there was also something else. A past weighed with responsibility, a story unspoken. "I have faced many threats," she said. "Why should I believe yours is different?" Theron's gaze softened, and for a moment the morning light revealed lines of age and battle on his massive face. "Because this is no ordinary threat. It is old, older than either of us, and it watches, patient, waiting for a mistake. I came because I have knowledge, and you have the courage to face what is coming." The pup barked suddenly, startling both of them. It ran to Theron, sniffing his boots, then yipped and turned back to Ilara. She watched the interaction with caution. This giant, massive and imposing, and this tiny creature, they had some connection, some invisible bond that she could not yet understand. Her instincts screamed to protect, but she could not stop herself from being curious. "Why is it drawn to you?" she asked quietly, more to herself than to him. Theron's lips curved slightly, a shadow of a smile. "It senses what you cannot yet see. It is not just a pup. It is a key, a guide, and a reminder that even the smallest beings carry weight in the threads of destiny." Ilara's heart tightened. She had spent centuries moving through darkness, untouched by bonds or ties. And yet the pup, the giant, and this strange morning, everything combined to stir something she had long denied. Hope. Not a loud, bright hope, but the quiet kind that whispers beneath the surface. promising that the world is bigger than her solitude. For hours they stood in the courtyard, the pup darting between them, sniffing, exploring, unaware of the tension it had already caused. Elara watched Theron, noting every small gesture, the way he respected the pup's space, the way he observed her without challenge. There was power here, but not arrogance, strength but not cruelty, and somewhere deep inside she realized that power tempered by wisdom was rare, almost as rare as trust. As the sun climbed higher, a shadow passed over the courtyard. Elara's sharp eyes caught it immediately. A hawk, enormous and black as midnight, circled above. Its cry echoed sharply, slicing through the quiet morning. The pup growled, low in warning. Theron followed her gaze. "The warning has come," he said. "The world beyond your walls stirs. It is testing us, testing what we are willing to protect." Elara nodded slowly, a chill running down her spine. She had lived through centuries of battles, storms, and betrayals. Yet something about this morning, this giant and the mysterious warning in the sky, made her uneasy. Fate, it seemed, was moving swiftly, and she was already caught in its current. The castle gates groaned as the wind shifted, and Elara felt the pull of destiny tighten around her. She glanced down at the pup, its white fur gleaming in the sunlight, and knew that whatever came next she could not fail. Not for the creature, not for herself, not even for the strange bond forming with the giant who had appeared without warning. And then, from deep within the forest, a distant rumble echoed once more. It was louder, closer, and filled with intent. Elara stiffened. Theron's eyes met hers, wide with recognition and concern. The forest, the castle, the pup. They were all pieces on a board she could not yet see fully. The giant took a step forward, earth trembling beneath him, and Elara realized something terrifying and exhilarating at once. The next moment would change everything. The world she had built in solitude was about to collide with a destiny she could not control. The castle was quiet, but its silence was heavy with unspoken truths. Elara moved through the winding corridors with measured steps, the white wolf pup padding close to her side. Its small paws made soft sounds against the polished stone floor, yet even those faint noises seemed to echo, reverberating through the halls. Outside, the forest whispered and trembled with the distant presence of something ancient, something waiting. Theron followed closely, each step deliberate. Even in the castle's narrow corridors, his size was impossible to ignore. The walls seemed to shrink around him, yet he moved with surprising grace, careful not to crush the delicate tapestries or the ancient artifacts that lined the halls. His golden brown eyes reflected curiosity and caution in equal measure, and Elara found herself studying him more than she cared to admit. He was enormous, powerful, and yet he carried himself with a restraint that suggested a history of discipline. Or perhaps tragedy. "You are very cautious in your movements," she said softly, glancing at him from the shadows. Most would have trampled everything in their path. Theron's lips curved faintly. "I respect what has lasted through centuries," he said. "Even power must bow to time and care. There are lessons in restraint, lessons I have not always learned." Elara's golden eyes flicked toward him, curious. "And now you are here to teach me?" "No," he replied gently, shaking his massive head. "I am here to warn, to guide. Perhaps if fate allows, to protect." The pup barked, breaking the tension, and ran toward a large tapestry that depicted the castle in its earlier days. Its tiny nose traced the edges of the threads as if sensing some hidden secret within. Elara frowned and followed, feeling an unease that went beyond the pup's innocent curiosity. There were always secrets in this castle. Some she knew, others she had learned to fear. They entered a narrow chamber that smelled of dust and old parchment. Shelves lined the walls filled with scrolls, tomes, and artifacts that hummed faintly with power. The room was shadowed, but a single shaft of morning light fell upon an ancient mirror in the corner. Its glass was darkened with age, yet it seemed to pull at Elara, whispering of things she could not yet see. "This room has not been touched in decades," Elara said, her voice echoing softly. "Few dare enter it. It holds knowledge, dangerous knowledge." Theron's gaze swept over the shelves, lingering on a tall, leather-bound tome etched with silver symbols. "Dangerous knowledge often holds truth," he said, "and truth is what we need to face the threat that comes." Elara's fingers brushed the spines of the books, feeling their power hum beneath her touch. She had spent centuries in solitude, guarding secrets and honing her strength. And yet, in this moment, with the giant beside her. She felt vulnerable in a way she had not allowed herself to feel for centuries. The pup whimpered, nudging her hand, and she looked down, seeing trust and innocence in its eyes. Somehow the pup had changed everything. Somehow it had drawn not just her attention, but the attention of fate itself. Theron stepped closer to the mirror, massive hands brushing lightly over the frame. "This shows what is hidden," he said quietly. "Not just in this castle, but in the world. And not just to your eyes, to ours together if we are willing to see." Ilara's heart tightened. She had spent years hiding from truths. About herself, about her past, about the darkness that lingered always at the edges of her life. And now here was a being whose presence demanded she confront them, whether she was ready or not. The pup whimpered again, ears flat, and Ilara realized that something unseen was stirring within the castle. The hairs on her neck rose, and she felt the familiar pulse of unease. Something was watching, something ancient and patient, waiting for the moment to strike. Theron's gaze met hers. "I can feel it too," he said. "The force that hunts the pup, it is old. Older than these walls, older than your lineage, older than the castle itself. And it is clever. It waits for mistakes, for moments of distraction, for hesitation." Ilara's golden eyes narrowed. She had faced hunters, beasts, and even other vampires in her long life. Yet she could sense that this threat was unlike any she had encountered. It was patient, intelligent, and cruel. Not just in its power, but in its strategy. "I do not falter easily," she said, her voice steady, though her pulse raced. "I will protect what must be protected, even from shadows that have lived before my birth." Theron nodded, a faint respect in his expression. "Good, then we have a chance." The pup suddenly darted forward, barking sharply. Ilara turned just in time to see a flicker of shadow move across the chamber floor. The candles flickered as if disturbed by an unseen wind, and the air grew colder. The temperature dropped rapidly, brushing against her skin like icy fingers. "The darkness is near," Theron said, his deep voice steady but tense. "It tests us now to see how we respond. Every hesitation, every doubt will be observed." Ilara stepped forward, placing herself between the pup and the shadows. Her cloak flared behind her as she moved, and she felt the familiar surge of power coursing through her veins. Her senses sharpened, golden eyes scanning every corner, every flicker of movement. She had faced monsters before, but this was different. The darkness felt aware, intelligent, waiting for her to make a mistake. The pup growled, low and warning, and Ilara realized with a start that it was not just a helpless creature. Even in its small form, it carried a spark of strength, of life, that drew attention from forces beyond understanding. Somehow the pup was important, more than she had realized. Theron stepped forward, placing a massive hand on her shoulder. "Trust yourself," he said quietly, "and trust what you protect. The pup's strength lies not in its size, but in its role, in what it represents, and in us if we act together." Ilara's heart beat faster. She had spent centuries trusting no one, relying only on herself, building walls around her heart and soul. And now here was a giant, an impossibly large, impossibly strong, impossibly patient being, telling her to trust, to believe. And she realized that the smallest spark of hope had begun to grow in her chest. The shadows shifted again, and a figure emerged from the darkness. It was humanoid, yet distorted, its eyes glowing faintly with malice. Its movements were fluid, almost too smooth, as if it had learned to mimic life. It paused at the edge of the chamber, studying them, sensing hesitation, probing for weakness. Ilara's claws extended instinctively, glinting in the dim light. Theron moved beside her, placing himself between the creature and the pup. "It tests us," he said. "Do not let it see fear. Do not let it see doubt." The creature hissed softly, a sound like wind through dead leaves, and advanced a step. Ilara felt her pulse quicken, but she did not retreat. She focused on the pup, on Theron, on the warmth of life and courage that surrounded her. And as the creature lunged, she moved with speed and precision, striking it back into the shadows. Theron's massive hand landed on the floor, sending a shockwave through the room, and the creature recoiled. "It will not relent," he said grimly. "This is only the beginning. It watches, waits, and learns. Every moment we spend in hesitation gives it advantage." Ilara's golden eyes met his, and in that silent exchange, a bond formed, not just of trust but of recognition. Two beings, centuries old in their own ways, standing together against a darkness that sought to unravel everything they cared for. She realized with a thrill and a shiver that they were stronger together than apart. The pup whimpered, approaching them cautiously, its small body pressed between them. Ilara bent down, brushing its fur gently, whispering, "We will not fail. Not now, not ever." Theron's gaze softened and he nodded. "We will see this through," he said. "And when the darkness comes again, we will be ready." A sudden wind rattled the chamber's windows, carrying with it a sound that made Ilara's blood chill. A soft, almost melodic whisper, words she could not understand yet felt in her bones. The darkness had not fled. It had only retreated to observe, to wait, to learn. Ilara straightened, the pup trembling slightly in her arms. Theron's shadow loomed beside her, solid and unwavering. Together they faced the chamber, the whispers and the shadows that moved just beyond the edge of sight. For the first time in centuries, Ilara felt a fragile, dangerous hope. They were not alone, and perhaps in this bond, in this fragile trust, there was a chance to protect not just the pup but themselves, and the fragile world that had placed them together. And then, from deep within the castle, a faint rumble shook the walls, a reminder that the forces waiting in the shadows were patient, and that this battle, this dance with fate, had only just begun. The forest stretched before them, dense and silent, yet alive with whispers. Trees towered like guardians of an ancient secret, their gnarled roots twisting across the ground like dark veins. Mist curled along the undergrowth, wrapping around rocks and fallen logs, hiding what might lie beneath. The morning sun barely pierced the canopy, casting a muted green-gold light over the twisted forest floor. Ilara moved first, her cloak brushing over moss and leaves, eyes sharp and alert. The white wolf pup followed closely, ears pricked, tail flicking nervously. Behind her, Theron's enormous footsteps made the ground tremble slightly, yet he moved with caution, aware of the fragile world around him. Even in his size and power, he respected the forest. "This place, it feels alive," Ilara said quietly, her golden eyes scanning every shadow. "I have walked forests for centuries, but this one is different. It watches. It judges," Theron nodded. "It has been touched by old magic, curses that have lasted generations. Many have entered and never returned. The forest chooses what it will allow, and it tests those who walk within it." The pup barked suddenly, darting toward a moss-covered stone. It sniffed at a small glowing flower that seemed to pulse with its own faint light. Ilara knelt, examining the plant. "This is no ordinary bloom," she whispered. "It thrives on the old curses that flow through this forest. Touch it incorrectly and it will strike." Theron crouched beside her, his massive hand hovering near the plant, careful not to disturb it. "The forest tests every step," he said. "It watches courage and fear alike, and it senses what you protect." Ilara's gaze shifted to the pup, which seemed unafraid, even curious. Somehow it carried a strength that defied its size. She realized that the pup's innocence was its power, a light that even the darkest magic could not touch without consequence. They continued forward, following a narrow path that twisted deeper into the heart of the forest. The trees grew taller, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked the sunlight entirely. Shadows pressed close and the air grew colder. A soft hum, almost musical, resonated through the trees. Ilara's sharp ears caught it, but she could not tell where it came from. "Listen," Theron said softly. "The forest sings. It hums the memory of those who have passed through. Every sound, every note carries warning and guidance. But it is easy to be lost in it, or led astray." Ilara clenched her fists lightly, feeling the familiar pulse of power awaken in her veins. "Then we must trust ourselves," she said. "And each other." They pressed on, and soon the whispers became voices, faint but distinct. The forest spoke in riddles and half-formed shapes that danced along the edges of vision, shapes of wolves, of hunters, of shadows too quick to catch. The pup growled low in its throat, moving closer to Ilara's side, its small body trembling but ready. A sudden movement caught their eyes. A wolf, spectral and pale, emerged from the mist. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and its form shimmered as if it were made of smoke. It moved slowly, deliberately, circling them. Ilara stepped forward, claws extended, ready to defend the pup. But the wolf did not attack. Instead, it let out a long, mournful howl that echoed through the trees. "It is testing us," Theron said, his deep voice steady. "It seeks to understand whether we are friend or foe, protector or predator." The pup whimpered, stepping toward the ghostly wolf. Ilara's heart tightened. She had seen spirits before, creatures of darkness and light, but the connection between the pup and this spectral wolf was undeniable. There was recognition, a bond that bridged realms. The wolf's howl ended, and it faded into the mist, leaving behind a faint scent of wildflowers and cold earth. The forest grew still again, but the sense of being watched remained. Hours passed as they ventured deeper, navigating traps and illusions woven into the forest by ancient magic. The ground shifted beneath them, roots rising to trip the unwary, stones moving to block the path. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming shapes that vanished the moment they were seen directly. Ilara led the way, senses heightened, every movement precise. Theron's strength became crucial as they encountered obstacles that required not just agility, but force. Fallen trees that blocked the path were lifted aside with his massive hands. Boulders moved to reveal hidden tunnels, and branches that lashed at them like whips were snapped with controlled power. Through it all, the pup remained steadfast, running ahead to scout paths, its small form a beacon of courage. Ilara realized that the pup's trust in her and in Theron was strengthening her own resolve. Together they were a force the forest had not anticipated. Finally they reached a clearing. Moonlight, breaking through the thick canopy above, illuminated a small stone altar at its center. The pup ran forward, circling the altar and sniffing the air. Ilara and Theron followed cautiously. "This is a place of power," Theron said, his voice low. "Curses have been bound here for centuries. And the pup, it is drawn to it. There is a connection." Ilara knelt beside the altar, tracing the faint carvings with her fingers. The runes glowed faintly beneath her touch, pulsing with energy. "These markings, they are protective and binding," she whispered. "Someone or something used this place to guard the innocent, but also to test those who seek to interfere." A sudden chill swept the clearing, and shadows coalesced at the edges. Ilara felt the familiar pulse of danger, sharp and immediate. The air thickened, pressing against their lungs. The forest had shifted again, and this time it was not testing. They were being challenged. From the shadows a figure emerged. Its form was human-like, but twisted and distorted. Its eyes glowed red, and its hands ended in long, claw-like fingers. It moved with unnatural grace, circling the altar, studying them. Ilara's claws extended, gleaming faintly in the moonlight. Theron stepped forward, placing himself between her and the creature. "It knows fear," he said, "and it feeds on hesitation. Do not give it strength." The pup barked sharply, running forward despite its size. The creature recoiled slightly, as if surprised by its boldness. Ilara felt a surge of pride and warmth. Even in its small form, the pup had courage beyond measure. Together, Ilara and Theron moved as one. Her speed and precision, his strength and presence, created a balance the forest and its guardian could not anticipate. The creature lunged at them, but they dodged, blocked, and countered, each move fluid and synchronized. Finally, with a combined effort, Theron's massive hand struck the ground, sending a tremor that forced the creature back. Ilara stepped forward, placing her hands on the altar. The runes glowed brightly, sending a wave of energy that pushed the darkness into the edges of the clearing. The creature hissed, fading into the shadows, leaving only a faint scent of smoke and iron. The forest seemed to exhale, its tension releasing like a held breath. Ilara looked down at the pup, which ran to her side, tail wagging slightly, eyes bright. She knelt, brushing its fur gently. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Theron lowered himself to sit beside them, massive frame towering but calm. "This was only a part of the trial," he said. "The darkness will return. But we have proven ourselves capable. And the pup, it has shown its strength. It is more than an innocent creature. It is a symbol, a guide, and perhaps a key." Ilara felt her chest tighten, a mix of exhaustion, relief, and something unspoken. For the first time in centuries, she allowed herself to feel hope, fragile and dangerous, but real. The bond between them, vampire, giant, and pup, had deepened. Trust had begun to form where only caution had lived. Yet even as she breathed in the cold forest air, she could not shake the sense of foreboding. The creature had retreated, yes, but it would return. The forest had been tested, and so had they. The pup, small and brave, had been their guide. But fate, as always, had more in store. Ilara looked at Theron, his massive form calm yet alert, eyes scanning the shadows. In that glance, she realized that their journey was no longer about mere survival. It was about understanding, trust, and the courage to face whatever destiny had planned for them next. A low, distant rumble echoed through the trees, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The pup growled, ears flat. Theron's gaze hardened and Alara felt her pulse quicken. The forest had spoken again, warning them of trials still to come. And as the mist curled around them, silver and shifting, she knew one thing with certainty. The next step of their journey would test not just their strength, but their hearts and the fragile bond that had begun to form in the shadow of danger. The forest trembled as the rumble grew louder, shaking leaves from the trees and stirring the mist into twisting, dancing forms. Alara crouched low, claws extended, her golden eyes scanning the shadows. The white wolf pup pressed close to her side, fur bristling, ears flat. Behind her, Theron's massive frame loomed like a shield, every muscle tense, every sense alert. "They are coming," Theron said, his deep voice steady but tight. "The darkness, it has grown impatient. It knows the pup is here, and it knows we are ready to face it." Alara's heart beat faster. She had faced many threats before, from hunters to cursed spirits, but this one felt different. It was alive in a way that made the forest itself shiver, and yet she did not falter. The pup, small but fearless, had already shown her a courage that inspired even the strongest resolve. Together, they moved toward the center of the forest where the clearing with the ancient altar awaited. The runes on the stones glimmered faintly, sensing the approaching confrontation. The mist swirled violently as shadows emerged, tall and twisting figures with glowing red eyes. Their forms were ever shifting, impossibly fast, and their whispers cut through the forest like sharp knives. Alara stepped forward first, letting her senses expand. The shadows circled them, testing, probing, seeking fear, but she held herself steady. Her golden eyes blazed like sunlight in the dark, and she called to the pup. "Stay close," she whispered. "We face this together." The pup barked, yipping defiantly, and ran a small circle around the shadows. Its presence seemed to confuse them, as if the creature's innocence and courage were an unexpected force in the heart of darkness. Theron shifted, his massive hands landing on the ground, sending tremors that rippled through the forest floor. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing. "Do not hesitate," he said, his gaze fixed on Alara. "Their strength lies in our doubt. Together we are stronger." Alara nodded. She felt a surge of power coursing through her veins. Her vampire instincts, honed over centuries, awakened fully. She stepped forward, claws extended, golden eyes flashing like fire in the shadowed mist. The shadows lunged fast as the wind, their forms twisting unnaturally, but she was faster. She struck with precision, sending the nearest figure reeling backward into the mist. Theron moved beside her, massive hands smashing the ground, hurling rocks and debris at the advancing shadows. The forest trembled with every strike, yet the giant moved with control, not harming the pup or the altar, only the darkness. His strength, combined with her speed and skill, formed a rhythm: attack, defend, strike, retreat, that the shadows could not anticipate. The pup barked again, small but fierce, darting between their legs, snapping at the shadow's heels, drawing attention away from Alara and Theron. Its courage was infectious. Alara felt a warmth in her chest she had long denied herself, pride, hope, and the fragile beginnings of trust that could grow into something stronger. But the darkness was relentless. From the mist, a single figure emerged, larger and more defined than the rest. Its eyes glowed brighter, its form sharper, more menacing. Alara's pulse quickened. She could feel its intent, its hunger for control. It was the source, the heart of the shadows, the force that had been testing them all along. "This is it," Theron said, his deep voice low. "The core of the darkness. It will take all our strength to overcome it." Alara tightened her grip on the pup and focused her energy. The altar glowed beneath her, responding to her presence. She realized then that the pup had been guiding them here all along, not just as a companion, but as a key to the forest's power. Its courage and innocence were connected to the magic of the place. The shadow lunged faster than thought, and Alara met it head-on. Claws met darkness, and a shockwave of energy rippled through the clearing. Theron slammed his hands down, the tremors scattering the lesser shadows. The pup barked and leapt, biting at the edges of the darkness, forcing it to divide its attention. Alara's golden eyes glowed brighter, feeding on the fearlessness around her, the pup's courage, Theron's strength, and her own centuries of honed skill. She struck again and again, moving like a storm of light and shadow until the darkness faltered. Theron roared, his voice shaking the forest, and slammed the ground once more. This time the energy from the altar surged outward, combining with Alara's power. The shadows screamed and twisted, unable to withstand the force. One by one they were pushed back, pulled into the mist from which they had come. The heart of the darkness remained, and it coalesced into a figure, humanoid but terrifying, its red eyes burning with fury. It lunged at Alara, but Theron intercepted it with a massive blow, sending it crashing backward into the altar. The runes flared brightly, reacting to the combined strength of the vampire, the giant, and the pup. Alara stepped forward, placing her hands on the altar. Energy flowed into her, warm and powerful. She channeled it into the heart of the darkness, not to destroy but to bind. The shadows shrieked and twisted, resisting, but the power of trust, courage, and protection was stronger. The pup barked, circling the altar, adding its small but potent energy to the force. Slowly, the darkness shrank, drawn into the altar, until nothing remained but faint wisps of shadow, dissolving into the mist. The forest seemed to exhale, the tension lifting, the air growing warmer, lighter. The trees no longer loomed with menace but stood as silent witnesses to the victory. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. The pup leapt onto her lap, nuzzling her neck, and she felt a warmth she had not felt in centuries. Theron lowered himself beside her, massive frame casting a comforting shadow, and his hand rested gently near hers, a silent gesture of solidarity. The clearing was quiet once more. The mist slowly lifted, revealing sunlight filtering through the trees. The altar glowed faintly, its power stabilized, the curses bound and held safely. Alara stood, brushing off her cloak, and looked at Theron. "You stayed," she said softly. Through everything, Theron's golden brown eyes met hers, calm but intense. "I promised," he said, "and I will always stand beside those I trust, beside those who show courage even when the odds are against them." Alara felt a tremor of something she had long denied, a connection, a bond that went beyond trust. She had spent centuries alone, guarding her castle, her power, her secrets. But here, in the heart of a forest once cursed, she had found something she had never expected: partnership, loyalty, and a spark that might grow into something deeper. The pup barked, running ahead, exploring the clearing with curiosity. Alara followed, feeling lighter than she had in centuries. The forest, once oppressive and full of menace, now seemed alive with quiet wonder. The shadows were gone, the curses bound, and the danger averted. Yet she knew this was not the end. Darkness would always linger at the edges of the world. But for now, they had won. As they walked back toward the castle, Theron's large hand brushed hers briefly, almost accidentally, yet the touch sent a ripple of warmth through her. She glanced at him, and for the first time, she did not see only a giant. She saw someone who had faced danger beside her, who had shared the burden, and who had earned her trust. The pup leapt ahead, ears flapping, and Alara laughed softly, a sound that felt foreign and yet natural, as if the forest itself encouraged it. Theron's deep rumble of amusement followed, and for the first time in centuries, Alara allowed herself to feel more than vigilance and caution. They returned to the castle as the sun began to set, the sky painted in hues of gold and crimson. The mist had cleared, leaving the forest serene and quiet. Alara climbed the balcony, pup in her arms, and looked out over the horizon. The castle stood tall, unbroken, a testament to centuries of endurance and now to courage, trust, and new beginnings. Theron stood beside her, silent and calm. His massive form was imposing yet comforting. Together they watched the forest below, knowing the trials they had faced had changed them both. Bonds had been forged, courage had been proven, and the darkness for now had been held at bay. The pup yipped happily, curling in Alara's arms, and she whispered softly, "We did it." Together. Theron nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Yes, together. And as the last light of day faded into night, Alara realized that the journey had done more than protect a small creature. It had awakened something within her: hope, connection, and the quiet possibility of love. For the first time in centuries, she did not feel alone. The castle, the forest, the pup, and the giant, everything had converged to remind her that even in the darkest of worlds, light could be found. And sometimes that light came not from power alone, but from courage, trust, and the bonds that form in the face of shadows.